Hey, everybody. Dave Hagan here. Today, I'm going to reveal the secret of our most powerful podcasts. That's today on the Financial Wellness Podcast.
Welcome to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. Here is your host, financial problem solver and talk show host, Dave Hagan.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Financial Wellness Podcast, or TFWP, as we like to call it. It's going to be a little shorter podcast today, but a very powerful podcast. So I gave the guys the week off, and I'm going solo. So as many of you know, we're in our fifth season. This is episode 512, and we have developed such a treasure trove of interesting stuff over these 5 seasons. And for those of you that have been with us from the very beginning, you've benefited from every single episode. But some of you are newcomers, and I know that. And people ask me, they say, Dave, well, what are the best episodes? And my answer is, they're all good episodes. Come on. But if you had to look or listen to the best episodes, let me tell you today what those are going to be, at least in my opinion. So these are the most powerful podcasts to date on the TFWP. Now get out your pen. If you're not on the road, get out your pen. I don't want anyone driving off the side of the road writing down podcast numbers. But if you are not on the road, get out your pen and write these episode numbers down. Episode number 102, we talked about 5 steps to financial wellness, our overview. It was our second one, our second podcast ever. I think that's an important podcast because we're talking about the 5 steps to financial wellness. And then episodes 105, 106, 107, we talk about 3 different ways to eliminate debt, different methods to get rid of debt, like the waterfall or the snowball way to eliminate debt. Don't know what those mean? Well, listen to episodes 105, 106, 107. And then in episode 108, and then again in episode 222, we talked about your emergency fund and the joy, the sheer joy and peace of mind of having an emergency fund. Episode 109, we talked about putting 15% into savings. In episodes 425, 426, 427, and 428, we talked about the 3 additional things that you would want to consider after you've achieved the 5 steps to financial wellness. So we were saying, hey, once you get to this point where you've righted the ship, consider these 3 additional things. And just a little hint, we talked about housing, education, and charity. We talked about it in those 4 podcasts. Podcast number 128, this was important to me. We talked about who's driving, who's controlling your mental thought process. Is it some media that's controlling what you think about, or is it you driving that bus? I like that one. In episode 141, we talked about catching fire, not burning up, but fire. Financial independence, retire early, a big move that's going on here in the United States. We talked about what's behind that. We talked about a couple of people that were getting to retire at a very early age because they had been following some of the guidelines of the FIRE movement. Episodes 201 and 202, we talked about setting goals. Basically, it was a workshop on how to set goals and how those goals should spring out of your tombstone statement, which should spring out of your overall life mission, if you will. And we spent a couple of sessions basically showing you how to sketch those out, how to put them in writing, et cetera, et cetera. In episode 228, we talked about the different types of retirement funds, at least as they're currently constituted. A lot of people get bogged down and what all those different kinds of retirement funds are. We broke it down and we were able to cover it in about 30 minutes. And by the way, all of these podcasts are about 30 minutes, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. Remember, our theme this year is 30 minutes a week to financial wellness. And we think that in just 30 minutes a week, we can keep your thinking moving down the line towards financial wellness and get you to where you want to be. I really liked episode 230. We talked about this best-selling book, The Wealthy Barber, by a fellow named David Chilton, and it was someone else's take on financial wellness. Basically, the same basic thought processes, the same basic destination that people want to get to, but just someone else's different take on financial wellness. That's episode 230. 242, we talked about Charlie Munger's success tips. Last week, we spoke about the Berkshire Hathaway letter, and Charlie Munger is a big part of Berkshire and a big part of everything that Warren Buffett does. And Charlie has a way of breaking things down to their very basic when he makes these very dry, very pithy, very powerful observations. And he had a number of success tips, and we spent a good time or had a good time talking about them in episode 242. In episode 310, we talked about 9 steps to a better workday. There was some good stuff in there. Some of that maybe has changed now with the coronavirus and people wanting to work at home or spending more time working at home. But I think it was something that's very worthwhile and worth revisiting if you're new to the TFWP. Episodes 320 and 321, we did an interview with Ryan Steiger. He's the author of The Dividend Hunter. His book's available on Amazon. A pretty thoughtful guy. And among the things that he had said in those interviews, don't buy depreciating assets with your money, buy income, buy bonds, buy something that's going to give you a revenue stream for the rest of your life. Yes, you have to put up a good deal of money to get that return, but at some point, you will not have to work if the income that you have, if the dividends that you have are enough to cover your monthly operating expenses. So a couple of really good interviews there, episode 320 and 321 with Ryan Steiger. Episode 423 and 424, I was guest lecturing at a local university, and some of the students had listened to some of the podcasts, and I asked them what their favorites were. And one fellow raised his hand and he said, I really like the podcast where you were talking about whether you should talk about your money with your friends, your family, et cetera, et cetera. I thought that was good. Apparently he thought it was good. So check it out, 423, 424. And finally, episode 509, Are You Wealthy? We did that just a couple of weeks ago. How much money does it take for you to be wealthy? A recent Schwab survey said that people thought it was about $1.7 million. And we came to the realization that it's up to each individual person. And my personal definition of wealthy is when the income on your investments covers your expenses. So there's 2 ways that you can get at being wealthy: by lowering your expenses or increasing the return on your investment or increasing the size of your investment. And when you hit that point, you are wealthy. So there you have it, a very short, little concise list. Maybe there's about 20 episodes. I like all of the episodes. I think they all have interesting information in them, obviously, because I thought them up and participated in all these episodes. But if you just want to hit the highlights, if you want to hit the most powerful podcast, listen to those. Well, I think that's it today. I told you that it would be a shorty, and it was a shorty indeed. Use this time to maybe go back and listen to a couple of these podcasts that may have piqued your interest or that you may not completely remember or maybe never even heard. But what a great list, what a powerful list that is. Our most powerful podcast. Next week, the guys will be back. Check us out. In the meantime, this is Dave Hagan, and you've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast.
You've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. If you have a question that you would like Dave to answer on the podcast, go to thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can leave an audio message with one click of a button, or type your message into the question box. Either way, it's sent right to Dave's phone. Remember, Dave will randomly draw from the submitted questions and pick the winner of a free 1-hour personal conversation with Dave to help you achieve your financial goals. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you receive the new episode notifications, or share the podcast via the app with your family and friends. This is your announcer, Nick Appel, wishing you every financial success.